Hello, my name is Charlie Felter. I'm from England and I've traveled the world a lot and we speak different languages at home. We speak Russian, in my family we speak French and Spanish. Some people speak German, some people used to speak Russian and Ukrainian. So lots and lots of languages, even Arabic because we've traveled a lot, we're traveling people, and in England some people really travel a lot. And I'm really into languages. So I've lived in London and I've really liked it. So that's why I teach English now. However, I always want to improve my language skills. And this is really important to me because I believe that the best way to travel, if you're interested in traveling, well, you've got to learn a language. Learning a language is necessary. If you want to travel, you're gonna have to improve your language skills, because otherwise, I've traveled with, well, there are situations when you just travel to a country, and I've done it. For example, when I came to Ukraine the first time, about 10 years ago, I didn't know any Russian. And that was it was completely crazy. It was very difficult because I didn't know a single word. And I'll tell you something, in languages, there are things that are called false friends. So in Russian, you have lots of words that come from French, such as cravat, which is the bed. But in French, that means a tie, yeah? Or you have palto, yeah? Palto is a slang word in French. It's an old slang word in French that means your back, back. And that's, and that means a coat in Russian, as you know. So lots and lots, there's thousands of words like this in Russian. And the way I understood these words were I understood them as I know them in French. Or some of these words, if you say intelligent and intelligently, it's not the same thing. They're very different. They have their very different meanings. So basically, you're a bit lost. First, you're trying to get used to the words to understand. Well, you think you understand the words you already know that sound similar, but actually they're not similar. They mean something else. So you're completely lost. And it took me. I went back to Europe and I started to study Russian really hard. And then afterwards, from 2 or 3 months, I could understand people, and then I felt alright. And I came back to Ukraine several years later, and it was fine. It was okay, and I still study it very hard. However, there are different ways to go through this process. So, for example, you want to speak a lot, and just speaking is not enough. But for example, with English, that's okay. You can learn a lot from speaking, and you will learn more from speaking than just only doing grammar. My point of view is you want to speak as much as possible, listen as much as possible, meet as many native speakers as possible, or people, which is very useful as well. Meet foreigners who speak English, who are going to speak English with you, who speak English quite well, and with whom you can, improve your skills, because they're students of English and you're a student of English, and that's going to be very helpful. So that's one way. Always find speaking clubs. Or the best. Or what I also tell my students to do is, for example, is not to just learn the language technically. So, for example, I know people who speak the language so well. Like I have had students from different countries who spoke English like native speakers, and they were really good, and that was fantastic. However, with some of those people, their strategy was purely linguistic. So, and that's okay, but one of the problems is they focused on the technicalities of the language, but they didn't focus on their passion, and that's very hard. If your passion is languages, then that's going to be fine. That's going to be okay for you, and that for these people that I've taught, that was fine. However, for most people, we want to focus on the things we like. And I've got the things I like, you've got the things that you like. And if you focus on your passions, well, the internet can be a great tool to learn these things. So, for example, your hobbies, your passions, whatever it is, whatever they are, cars, fishing, football, I don't know, corrida. I'm not really into it, but I don't know, anything, astronomy, mathematics, all the things you like are all on the internet, and you can use this. Basically, we all use the internet based on things we like, because we have our favorite YouTube channels, we have our favorite websites and blogs and all these things. But most of us, we prefer to read these blogs, these articles, this information in our native language, and this is when you've got to make a shift. You've got to start doing these things in English. So if you're interested in relationship skills, or the way men relate to women and how women relate to men, well, if you're reading books in Russian, that's all right, that's good. But if you read them in English, you won't notice that you are actually reading in English, because you are learning. You'll be reading something that you like. So you'll focus on these new aspects of relationships and anxiety approach, and I don't know, lots of different things in how men behave with women and all these things, and that's going to be very interesting. However, it's things that you like eventually, I don't know, but you're going to do it in English, and that's cool. You won't notice it, and there will be new vocabulary that you want to find out. So you look it up in a dictionary, and that's always useful. That's one of the skills that's very difficult to acquire. It's to actually look up words in the dictionary. Even with me, I mean, if you're not an intermediate student yet, this is a skill you want to get used to it, but it's difficult. It's very difficult. I'm sort of have a Russian intermediate level. I mean, my French is absolutely fluent. I speak, je parle français parfaitement, couramment, aussi bien que l'anglais. I've just translate. I speak it just as well as English. Y hablo español también muy bien, porque viví en España. I speak Spanish very well because I lived in Spain. So this, for me, it's normal. They're normal situations, and I can look up these words in the dictionary because I have a feel for these languages. However, as an sort of intermediate, maybe intermediate, upper intermediate Russian language student, for me it's difficult to get used to looking up words in the dictionary, and that's something you have to get used to. You have to, at the beginning it's difficult, but you sort of do it slowly. One of the things that people get frustrated with when learning languages is they think it's going to happen in one go. They think that's it. I'm going to get the best teacher in the world, and they come to me very often and they say, well, I want to know everything in 1 hour. Well, first of all, I could say, well, I could rip them off. I could say, well, you're going to have to pay me so that much money. But actually, that's not what I do, because that's just, first of all, that wouldn't be good for my reputation. I just tell them the truth. It's going to take time. It's going to take time, and you can't quantify, you can't understand or calculate when you're going to have reached the next level. So, for example, IELTS students come to me and they expect to get a 7.5 or an 8 at IELTS, and that you can't calculate. That's the thing. So you want to develop a taste for the language, a feel for the language, and the best way to do this very often is to meet people, who speak this language, and especially if with English we have Americans, English people, Welsh, Scottish people from Scotland, Aussies from Australia. They speak it differently, and they also have their own culture, and that's cool because listening to this language from a different perspectives, they have different accents, but they value different things. So when you meet these people and you enjoy speaking with them, and you feel you really like them, and you start to value the things they value. So when you exchange values like this, they'll start to value the things you like eventually, because they like you. So there's communication happening, and by valuing what they like, you really this becomes part of you, and as it becomes part of you, the words will come naturally when you get to speak about these things. So so in England, I mean, what could be very important in England, for example, business is important, you know. So a big part of learning English is learning business language. So for example, in Russian, you can't learn finance, and there are people who learn finance at university here, and that's very good. However, I teach finance here as well, and one of the things I've noticed is the financial language is really sort of a very English thing, you know, very English language thing. So Americans will invent new words with new products coming up. It's difficult to translate these words into French and into Spanish and into Russian. And that's one of the things that when you discover these words and you know what they are, well, and you're a financial person, well, English is really is language for you. For example, if you think about, you know, the internet, and I think about marketing, you know, and search engine optimization and things like this, a lot of these words are going to be, you know, these technicalities. I'm not an expert in this, but I've looked into it, and it's interesting. And I know that a lot of it is American language. They invent new words, so that's really interesting as well. And you meet people who are into it. Well, new words will pop up, new words will come up, and you'll ask questions. And basically, that's another thing. Being experimental is very important. For me, what's very important, I'm a low risk taker usually, but for me, traveling is I take high risks because I've done it all my life, and for me, it's okay. There are things I won't do, but for coming here to Ukraine is, you know, and usually to a Russian-speaking country, in terms linguistically, that's a big risk. It's a big risk. You're starting from scratch, and when at the very beginning, you're basically learning a language. Your perspective should be that you want to take it like you're a 4-year-old at school, or you're at kindergarten, and you're reading, and you read these kindergarten books, and you shouldn't take it like this is a humiliation. You should take it like this is a privilege, you know, starting from scratch, and this is what it's going to be like. So experimenting is very important, and that's where the risk lies. Is you're in a new country, and you go to Australia or you go to England, and you've basically what a lot of Russian speakers do, and Ukrainian speakers do, and people who speak Russian, you know, or Slavic countries in this part of the world do, they use grammar, and there's nothing wrong with this, except that you need practice, and to develop the love of the language, you need to speak with the people who can really speak this language very, very well. So going on a trip to one of these countries, to America, to Canada, to England, can be very useful. Or if you can go to a speaking club and meet native speakers, that's very useful as well. And ask questions. You don't know what, you know, it's because some of these speaking clubs I understand some of your feelings, because some of you may feel like it's strange. You go to a speaking club and you're the least experienced of all there, and you feel shy to speak in English, to express yourself, and the people who speak better than you lead the conversation, and you're like, oh well, I don't want to come back here because nobody pays attention to me. That's when you've got to ask questions, because it's like meeting someone for the first time. You know, there's a rush of adrenaline. We're not quite sure if this is going to work, and that's what it's like. And you want to ask questions. What does this mean? What does this mean? How do you say this? How, you know? Oh, krisha. Oh, roof. Right. Okay. How do you say this? You know. How do you say camera? Oh, it's the same word. Oh, camera. All right. How do you say, you know, window? Oh, no. That's what I did. That's what I did, and that's how I learned a lot of vocabulary. And you want to do these things. And other strategies, basically reading. Reading is very, very, very important. And I'll tell you why reading is so important. Because basically, languages, they're two things. They're a visual thing. they consist of visualization, and they consist of listening. And basically, the power of reading is that it combines these two elements. So when you read a word, very often, most of the time, you can visualize that word. And sometimes there's something kinesthetic as well about it, something that you can feel. It almost, there's something that has to do with touch. A bit less most of the time, not as much, but as well, there is this element. So the three elements, but mainly visualization and listening. Yeah. So auditory perception. When you read a word, you can visualize it and you can hear it. So the more you read, basically, the more you get used to these structures, and you implement these structures afterwards in your speech and in your writing. But you have to do a lot of reading. It's not, I've read a book and that's it. It's good. You've read a book, that's fantastic. That's very good. But it's not enough. Learning a language is a lifelong commitment. Or learning languages is a lifelong commitment. And what some of you are going to do, they're going to say, and it's happened to me, I know what it's like. Some of you are going to say, well, learning a language, I've tried it, it's difficult, I'm frustrated, I don't want to do it again, this is too difficult. And this is why some of you will say English is easy, it's an easy language. Well, I'll tell you something, English is okay, it's not difficult to reach sort of an intermediate level and reach some level of fluency. It's okay, and that's wonderful. However, if you want to reach a proficient level, if you want to speak at proficient level, or you want really people to respect you and native speakers to say, wow, well, that's going to take a long, long time. And in some ways, it's fun, because English is sort of it's got a scientific element to it. I'll tell you why. Because in lots of languages, you don't have this difference, for example, between I'm going to and I will. They're very different. They mean something different. But in Russian, you have я буду, you have one way. In French, you have one way, je vais. In Spanish, you have one way, boy. Sometimes you might have some other ways in French and Spanish, but it's not as specific as English. For example, in English, you might use different prepositions. So you might say, I've heard of it and I've heard about it. So you got off and about, and you got to know the difference between off and about and how you use these things. You got the difference in the tenses. In English, if you master your tenses, if you can master tenses in English are some of the most difficult tenses in the world. They're easy to conjugate. Conjugating those words, that's easy. It's not difficult. It's not difficult at all. In some ways, conjugation it's like conjugation in Russian. It's not very difficult. It's just in Russian you've got those prefix and those suffix, and that's difficult. The difference between я вышел and я шел and отъехать or some things like this. I'm not an expert in these things, but I know it's very difficult to use these prefix. But once you get that, that's okay. In English, the difference is you want to use the right tense. And sometimes, you know what, it is a little bit subjective and you have a little bit of freedom and you can do it your way. But some people won't understand you if you mix present continuous and simple present. That's very important. What do I do in life? I'm a teacher. What am I doing now? I'm speaking to you. I am speaking to you. It's different. The difference between past simple and present perfect. All these things have to be mastered. Well, understood. And you want to take it. You can't do it in one go. You want to do it gradually. And that's the last thing I want to say about this aspect of things. Is if you think I'm going to learn it all in one go, no, because there are native speakers who are studying these things, who have been studying these things all their lives, and they haven't had enough. They want to keep on and keep on because it's so specific. So you want to take it easy. You want to do it, regularly. It's all about stability. So if you jump into languages and you say, well, I'm going to learn it all, very quickly. In 1 month, I want to speak, English as well as a native speaker. It's probably not going to happen. But if it's, well, I can tell you, it's not going to happen. But if you take it slowly and you decide to do regular efforts and do 10 minutes a day on grammar or 15 minutes a day on grammar, watch your favorite YouTube channels or follow your passions and do it in English, go to a speaking club and follow all these things I've told you gradually, and just like, because you're enthusiastic about it, you're curious about it, and you really want to do it because you've got that desire. Because I can tell you, this is possible. You can master languages. I speak French, Spanish fluently like a native speaker, and people, when I meet Spanish people, they say he on Nash, they say es uno de nosotros, es nuestro. That's what they say. When I meet French people, they say, well, c'est un des nôtres, il est français. So when you speak these languages really well, people will feel like you're part of the team, and that's really good. And the one thing you can do is you're actually traveling in your mind. So you think differently, your behavior changes, you'll express yourself differently, and that's very rich. So keep on.